Well, I had a good friend in high school. His name was Matt, and he had an older brother who was in college when we were in high school. And he was, in our view, a pretty sophisticated music guy. He liked Elvis Costello before, Elvis Costello was a big deal. He had Springsteen records, and I didn't know anything about Springsteen. And I would go over to my buddy's house after school, and we would listen to this Bruce Springsteen guy. And I'm from an old city where there's not a lot of opportunity, and listening to Bruce, talk about wanting to get out of his town and strike out on his own, and being born to run and stuff like that. That kind of spoke to me. That I never thought my future was going to be in my hometown.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it would be. I was a little worried sometimes that maybe I'd be stuck in my hometown. So that resonated with me, those themes. And I really liked, whether it was like Jackson Brown, Warren Zevon, guys who were songwriters. And here was Bruce, who's sort of like a songwriter, but with more of an edge, with a bigger sound, a guitar driven sound.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me is one of my new online friends, Pete Abraham. Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jesse, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so give us your elevator pitch. Tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a native of the Boston area, and I've worked in newspapers my whole life. I covered the University of Connecticut basketball team for a while when I got out of college. I moved to New York and covered the Mets and the Yankees for a paper in suburban Westchester County. And since 2010, I've been at the Boston Globe covering the Red Sox. So I travel a lot, mostly for baseball games and to see our friend, Mr. Springsteen.
So, Pete, have you been able to travel over these past two seasons with the pandemic? How's that been affecting you?
Yeah, last year they only played a 60-game season,
Right.
and travel was pretty sketchy. So I think I only did 6 road games. We went to New York. We didn't want to fly. That seemed a little too risky.
Yeah.
So I drove to New York for one series. I drove up to Buffalo where Toronto was playing for another series, and this year I've traveled to all the road games. Which hasn't been as much fun as it used to be, but work is work, and you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I would think it is a little bit weird. We were able to last season. The Rangers had the new ballpark that no one could go see. Then they opened it up for the playoffs. So this year, my son and I, my brother-in-law, and just a bunch of us all went and got to see the new stadium. I love the air conditioning. I don't love it as much as I did the ballpark at Arlington. I love that field, but it is nice to have the covered air conditioning in the Texas heat.
Yeah, they had the World Series there last year, and it was very strange because I think there were only, other than the writers for the Dodgers and the Rays, there were only 12 national writers there. I was one of them. It was kind of strange to have such a small contingent of writers for the World Series, because usually there's several hundred of us,
Sure.
And there was a very small amount. So few of us that the commissioner actually thanked us for being there, which that's never happened before.
Yeah,
so.
That is nice. What were your thoughts of the new stadium?
It sure is big. There's a lot of room to walk around, and I like that they have sort of non-traditional places to watch the game. You can stand up in certain spots, or have a sort of seat at like a counter, or bar stools, and they have the regular seats and everything. But you could spend a good part of the game just walking around and stopping at different places. It's pretty. I like the concept. It's good. I went to plenty of games at the old park, and I got to tell you, there were some days we were out there watching batting practice on the field, and you were like, well, I might have to go back inside because I'm going to pass out. Like it was, especially on the field because
Yeah.
the heat was kind of directed
Yes.
downward. It was pretty miserable on the field. So
So, and I promise listeners we'll get to Springsteen in a minute, but um, I remember there was one July day game that we had bought a mini ticket plan. So it was my brother-in-law Clayton, my son, and I all there, and we were I guess a left field upper bleachers. So the sun is there's no shade; it's
yeah,
just hitting us, and it was down to the last strike, and I looked over to my brother-in-law and I said, Clayton, that batter might have swing. He needs to swing no matter what, because I don't care where that pitch is. That umpire is calling this a strike, because it was just miserable. And sure enough, you hear strike three out, and the batter goes to argue and then it's already gone. I mean, he's already,
oh yeah,
gone. Yeah, like nope. This thing has been. It's 100 degrees out. It is just crazy. So
yeah.
yeah. Well, let's talk about growing up. What kind of where did you grow up at, and what kind of music did your family listen to?
Well, I grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is a city of about 100,000 people, right before you get to Cape Cod.
Okay.
But it's definitely not Cape Cod.
Yeah.
An industrial old mill town, and kind of had its better days before I showed up. And it's my dad was a teacher, and he was a good music fan. He liked a lot of the stuff from the late '60s and early '70s.
Yeah.
We used to drive to a lot of places on vacation, and I remember listening to the Beatles or the Eagles, stuff like that. Rolling
Sure.
Stones. We always had music on in the car, and I had an aunt who was a big music fan, and when I would go over to her house, she played a lot of oldies. She had like collections of oldies that she would play from the '50s and '60s, and I listened to a lot of that stuff. And so yeah, music was always not live music. We didn't necessarily go to see anybody, but there was always music on in the house, and my aunt always had music playing on her. She had one of those big console stereos,
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
like a piece of furniture, and it had a turntable in it. And
Yeah.
I had another aunt who had the first 8-track tape player I ever saw, and she had Billy Joel and Elton John and stuff like that, and she had
Mhm.
headphones. That was a big thing. She had headphones, and
Oh
I
yeah.
would sit there and put on those big can headphones and listen to music. So I was blessed to have people in my family who were up to date on music at the time in the '70s growing up.
Did you ever go through a phase where you kind of rebelled against the music your family was listening to and you kind of went your own path, or did you just added to your
Well, no,
repertoire?
I wouldn't say I ever so I'm never going to listen to that again, but as I get older and got my license and figured out a way to get to Boston and Providence, which were pretty easy drives. Especially once I got into high school, my music tastes, I guess I like to say, evolved, and I saw, started going to see shows live, and I spent one summer traveling around New England watching the Clash, and once I got into Bruce, I did a lot of driving around to go see Bruce, and I saw Warren Zevon a few times, stuff like that. So it was I was fortunate to be where I was because between Boston and Providence, you could see a fair amount of good live music. So.
When did you discover Bruce, and what about him spoke to you?
Well, I had a good friend in high school. His name was Matt, and he had an older brother who was in college when we were in high school. And he was, in our view, a pretty sophisticated music guy. He liked Elvis Costello before, Elvis Costello was a big deal. And
Okay.
he had Springsteen records, and I didn't know anything about Springsteen. And I would go over to my buddy's house after school, and we would listen to this Bruce Springsteen guy. And I'm from an old city where there's not a lot of opportunity, and listening to Bruce, talk about wanting to get out of his town and strike out on his own, and being born to run and stuff like that. That kind of spoke to me. That I never thought my future was going to be in my hometown.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it would be. I was a little worried sometimes that maybe I'd be stuck in my hometown. So that, that resonated with me, those themes. And I really liked, whether it was like Jackson Brown, Warren Zevon, guys who were songwriters. And here was Bruce, who's sort of like a songwriter, but with more of an edge, with a
Sure.
bigger sound, a guitar driven sound. And that was something, it kind of hit me like a clap of thunder when I first heard it. And, just kind of at that point, going to get a record was a thing. You would,
Sure.
hop on your bike and go get a record. And I can remember when, I wasn't, I didn't go out and get Born to Run or Darkness. I was too young at the time. But I can remember, going to get The River and especially Born in the USA. I went to get Born in the USA, a cassette of Born in the USA. And I was working at a job in the summer. And I remember at my lunch hour, plugging the cassette in my car and listening to Born in the USA for the first time and being late to go back to my job after lunch because I wanted to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, sitting there thinking, wow, this is the best thing I've ever heard.
That's a great story. When you're starting to enjoy his music and go through this, had you had a chance to see him live? When's the first time you had a chance to see him live?
Yeah, well, it wasn't until it would have been my junior year of high school. I went to Saratoga Springs for the River Tour, December 4th, 1980, and
Okay.
went with one of my friends. We, it was a long drive, but we drove. Saw him live at Saratoga Springs, and I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but
Sure.
I remember just, we were the Saratoga Performing Arts Center is kind of not a stadium. It's more of like an outdoor, kind of venue, and
Yeah.
so it was, there he was, and those shows were epic back then. Long, 3-hour
Sure.
shows, and 28, 29 songs, whatever it was. And,
Yeah.
it was, to hear Born to Run, live and Darkness live. And, it was thrilling. And the acts I had seen live were always sort of one guy with a small band on a small stage.
Right.
And here's this guy with an enormous band and an enormous crowd. And, this very orchestral, layered music. And, boy, it was like a life-changing kind of experience.
Yeah, I often say there's two kinds of people, right? The people that see Bruce their first time and go, wow, that was long. And two, the ones that go, oh my goodness, I want to see him every chance I get. I always like to preface this, Pete, that the amount of times you've seen him is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. But for the record, have you counted how many times you've seen him?
Oh, yes, I certainly have. So counting everything, Bruce by himself, Bruce with, at others, Bruce at a bar,
Yeah.
different, every time I've seen Bruce sing, it's 163 times. And I want to say it's 15 states. And I've also been to Ireland to see him too.
Oh, that's on my bucket list. I would really like that.
It was really fun. And so I put a lot of miles on about three different Nissan Sentras back in the day, going to see Bruce, and been to California, been a few different places. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I imagine you also like the when he's touring and the Red Sox are traveling, you have that, those schedules next to each other to try to see what you could do, correct?
Yeah, and he's actually played at Fenway Park a couple times, and
right.
I was not able to go the first time because I was covering the Yankees, and it was just an important stretch for them, and I couldn't go. But when I started covering the Red Sox, he played at Fenway Park, and I literally they told us, we're going to make tickets available to the media, and I said, okay, that's great. But I didn't trust them how good the tickets would be.
Exactly.
So I literally went to the team president of the Red Sox, and I said to him, a guy named Sam Kennedy, I said, Sam, I know a lot of people have told you what a big Springsteen fan they are. I'm here to tell you, like, I'm the biggest Springsteen fan, and you got to get me good seats for these shows, these two shows. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I got a call. They said, come pick up your tickets. And we were both nights right next to the stage.
Oh,
About
nice.
you could lean on the stage practically. And then, yeah, geez, it was, to be at Fenway Park and to see him at Fenway Park, that was great. And the other time that it happily coincided with the end of the baseball season was when the Spectrum in Philadelphia closed. Bruce played this one final show at the Spectrum, and the Spectrum is across the street from Citizens Bank Ballpark,
Right.
where the Phillies play. And it was in 2009. It was the NLCS, and there was a day off in that series. And when you're a baseball writer, when there's a day off, you go to the park and you interview players and you write a story about the next game. And it usually gets done by about 5 or 6 o'clock. Well, I didn't have tickets, but I wrapped up my work about 6 o'clock. I literally walked across the street to the Spectrum and just walked around until I was able to buy a ticket, which was a very tough ticket because that was the last time he played at the Spectrum.
Sure. Yeah.
And Philadelphia is a huge Springsteen
Yes,
town.
it is.
So I ended up behind the stage, right behind Max, right on the front row of sort of the deck, the highest deck. So I was kind of like right over Max. The Spectrum was a very compact place. And he opened up that night with Price You Pay, which is a song I had never heard live and I'd always wanted to hear live.
Yeah.
And I was sitting next to two people I didn't know. And he comes out and he starts doing Price You Pay. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing Price You Pay.
Yeah.
And I thumped the guy next to me on the back. I go, he's doing Price You Pay. And the guy was like, oh, is that like a big deal? And I'm like, well, yeah, he hasn't done it since, 1982 or So they looked at me like I was insane. But yeah, that was a great night.
That's funny. I've been told by a couple people that actually is a pretty good vantage point, that behind the stage, because
it was great.
That he often will play to that side, but just it's a great view of seeing the whole band.
Yeah, I found Bruce walked behind the stage. I think it was especially for Out on the Street and a couple other things.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting was watching Max.
Yeah.
Because Max has sort of these I guess kind of like a holster of drumsticks.
Yeah.
And he breaks his drumsticks sort of every once in a while.
Wow.
And you could see him kind of break a drumstick, throw it away, and in one motion grab another one and come back up and keep playing. And I was like, wow, this is really fascinating to watch. And you saw how hard Max worked. Like the back of his shirt was soaked in sweat. And, when Bruce would do a ballad or, just an acoustic song, Max was literally like mopping down like he was a fighter, like it was really something to watch. And it was also kind of cool to see, you kind of had a view of the backstage area and you could see Kevin Buell with the guitar waiting to run up and, give Bruce a different guitar and then running back with the guitar to get another one. And, so you saw a little bit of the, behind the scenes stuff. And it was, at first I was like, oh man, I'm behind the stage. But after like 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool.
That's very cool. So that reminded me of two stories. And I remember when George Bush was still part owner of the Texas Rangers.
Sure.
And back then he was the son of a president. He had not run for governor yet. And we had tickets to see the Rangers. This was, I guess, before the ballpark, because there was, George, and these were pretty good seats because my friend was an attorney and the firm had season tickets, right? So we were there. And so we were watching George watch the game, but we spent I swear half the game just looking at the secret agent service agent going,
oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to go to the ball game. That's your job, is to go to the ball game. But how much do you get to enjoy it? Because you're still on protective detail. But who really wants to shoot, the president's son, right? So is this really a dangerous gig? Everything. So similar to watching Max break the drumsticks, it gives you a whole nother reason to watch.
Yeah.
The other thing, during your time, have you ever met Eric Nadel?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is on the radio often. I guess he is a huge music fan and is constantly like whenever the Rangers are traveling, he is looking to see what bands are playing at
Yeah.
what gig. So which I always thought was just kind of always cool of Eric. So good guy.
Well, that's kind of a funny thing about baseball writers. There's a lot of us who are sort of my age and grew up Springsteen fans. And there's I've gone to, I don't know how many shows with fellow
Yeah.
writers. And when Bruce played in Florida a few years ago, and it was during spring training, and I swear half the crowd were baseball people, either writers or executives or coaches, or, there
Yeah.
was and for like the next 2 weeks, every time you saw somebody at a game, you were like, hey, were you at Springsteen at Tampa? Oh yeah, it was great. And so, there's a lot of connections to Bruce in baseball.
There are two things that I've seen a lot of. Excuse me. One is I'm surprised if you grew up in the East Coast, there is a 50% chance you discovered Bruce in summer camp. Because when I hear people tell the story, at least half the people growing up in the East Coast, go to some summer camp. And then I had someone saying that if you are a sports writer over a certain age, it is mandatory you're a Springsteen fan. I mean,
Yeah,
that
pretty
just you
close.
can you can book it. So other stories from shows that you want to share with me?
Sure. When we went to Ireland, and
Yeah.
he played 2 nights in Dublin, and it was it was an equestrian arena, an equestrian venue, and they had some stands, but mostly it was a field, and it was right in the middle of Dublin. So we walked from our hotel to the field, and then we walked back, and there was a pub on the way back, and we said, let's stop at this typical Irish pub, and we'll have a drink before we go back to the hotel. And I'm sitting there with my brother-in-law, and we're going over the show, talking about the show. And this fellow next to me says, I was covering the Yankees at the time. And this fellow next to me says, hey, are you the guy who covers the Yankees? And I'm like, yeah, like, how do you know that? And he recognized me from a couple of TV things I had done. So here I am in Ireland at midnight in Dublin at a pub talking about Springsteen with this Yankee fan from New Jersey. And the whole place was full of Yankees fans and Red Sox fans and Bruce Springsteen fans, and a lot of people had come over from the States, and most of them were from the East Coast. So we had a great time, and then the pub closed at pretty early, so we were kind of bummed. And the barman said, well, if you're staying at a hotel, you can go to your hotel bar, and they stay open until you want to leave. So we all trooped back across the street to our hotel, and we ended up closing that bar until about 3:00 in the morning.
That's
so
fun.
yeah, it was fun.
Why did you decide Ireland?
Well, my brother-in-law is Irish, and he was going over there with his family to
Okay.
tour around for a little bit. So I went with them. It was during the baseball season, so it was kind of a quick trip, and went there, saw 2 shows, flew back the next morning, and went to work. But
Yeah.
I really recommend seeing him in Europe. It's quite an experience. The fans are, there's no talking, there's no walking around. People are laser focused on the show. Everybody knows the lyrics. Everybody knows what song it is. It's not like, I think sometimes, especially if you go to New Jersey or on the East Coast, there's a lot of people who are there sort of for the event and not because they're passionate about Bruce. The people in Ireland were passionate about Bruce. It was a really fun experience.
I have heard that, and I think that is on my bucket list. Like I said, to see someone, and I would love, because I've never been to Ireland, and so just to be able to do some sightseeing and see that.
Yeah.
I think that's not just in Jersey, because my first few times I saw him were all at Dallas shows. And so then when I went to see him somewhere else, like in Nashville or in Cleveland, I sometimes I think the Dallas crowd can be, it's similar to Cowboy fans, right? It's a place to go and to be seen,
Right.
not necessarily to experience. And there are diehard Cowboy fans. I'm not talking bad about all of us, but there is at least a percentage, especially during the 90s with the Aikman,
Right.
Cowboys, that it was a place to be seen, not versus versus like it appears most of the Philadelphia Eagle fans are there just because they live and die by the
Right.
the team.
Right.
So, did you get, did you make Broadway?
Oh, I did. Yeah, the first, not this last run, the first run.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was probably my greatest Bruce experience. It was we were very close. We were in the fourth row, and yeah, it was like it was amazing because when the show ended, there were people who were like sort of like emotionally spent, just sitting in their
Yes.
seats, like wiped out, and yeah, it was, geez, it was, yeah, that was phenomenal. Like we had an opportunity to go a second time, and I didn't want to go because I said it can't be any better than what I just saw, and I didn't want to sort of cloud that memory. So, and plus it was expensive as hell. But
Yeah.
I thought I'm gonna go that one time, and I'll never forget it. And that I'm happy to do that. So
Yeah. Linda asked me, she was able to help me go so I could go once. And she asked, would you go again? And I said, the only way I'd go again is like if we had enough money for you to go with me, like
yeah,
so I could see it new through your eyes. I said, if not, I'm fine. And I had mixed emotions. My hope was that he wouldn't change the show at all the second time. So that way I would like, oh, I've seen it. I don't need to. But when I heard he changed things up a little bit, I had a little envy of like, I really would like to go, but I knew it's just don't be greedy, right? Let's just save my
well,
pennies for a
yeah.
2022 tour.
Well, that's what I thought. I said I'd rather save my money, and I could probably go to two shows for the cost of that one.
Yes.
And I think, as everybody probably feels, that's going to be the last full band tour. So
Yeah.
I really want to see as many of those as I can possibly see.
Yeah.
And have it sort of put a bow on the whole thing, and go from there. So
So let's do predictions, Pete. And there are, it's often like sports predictions. There's no way till after the fact, but when he tours, knock on wood, 2022, do you think this will be a more of a like reunion tour where he's doing a whole range of songs? Or do you think he will be pretty heavy Letter to You, Western Stars, or maybe he'll surprise us with another album between now and whenever he tours?
well, I mean, this is just my guess,
Yeah,
obviously, but
exactly. Yeah.
I think he feels pretty strongly about Letter to You, and the quality of what's on Letter to You. And there's clearly songs when you listen to Letter to You, you can say, well, I can see this opening the set. I can see this closing the set.
Yeah.
You can obviously see, like, I'll See You in My Dreams ending the show. And
Yeah.
there's different different songs you can see will be great in concert, will be phenomenal in concert.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of Western Stars necessarily will translate to a concert, but there's probably a few songs that will.
Yeah.
And I don't know that. I mean, I think at this point, if you're a real, you know, huge Springsteen fan, you're going to go out and watch him tour. Do you really need to see Born to Run? Do you really need to see, Hungry Heart? Do you need, you've seen these all a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, to me anyway, I think he doesn't want to be a nostalgia act. He wants to be
Right.
an ongoing concern that he's got music in him, and he's got creativity in him. And Letter to You, I thought, was one of his best records in recent years, and maybe going back the last 5 or 6 records. And so I think, yeah, I don't think he's going to go out and all right, here we go, here's the best 5 songs off of whatever. I think he's going to want to show what he's done, and what
Yeah.
he's capable of. And yeah, there's still going to be, he'll mix in the hits, and it'll be good.
Yeah.
But and you also have to wonder, I mean, those guys are, they're getting older, and
Yes.
I just wonder, are you going to see, 28 song shows, or, at some point
Yeah.
he's not going to do all of those songs, because he's,
Yeah.
I think he's going to mix in a Letter to You song, instead of saying, okay, now I'm going to play Cadillac Ranch again. I think that
Yeah.
that'll be, I
I
think that's
agree.
what's going to happen. Yeah.
I was lucky enough, I had bought tickets to see the Eagles Hotel California tour like before the pandemic, and 2 years later, I finally got to see them Tuesday night. My wife and I went, and it ended up being about a 3-hour show. They played Hotel California in its entirety, took
Right.
about a 15-20 minute break to go change clothes because I guess they didn't want to sit in their, they all dressed up to do Hotel California. Then they came back in jeans and, like flannel shirts. Then they did, kind of a greatest hits medley. And then they went off store and then came back and did an encore. But it was roughly 8:05 to about 11:05. And Don Henley had said he said, I know things are crappy out there. For the next 3 hours, we're going to try to make it where you aren't worried about that, because it's going to be there when you get back. So, and they're all in there. I mean, I guess, Vince Gill is filling in, and Glenn Fry's son is playing with them.
Right.
Who, it sounds like it, but most of them are pretty old, are older too. And so,
Sure.
if I can get a 3 hour, if I can get a 2 hour show from Bruce, I'm happy. But I think if you can stick that 2.5, 3, and they have to do shows every third day versus every other day, maybe we'll do it. But yeah, it is going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if you're not going to see the 8 nights at Madison Square Garden and whatever, stuff like that. It'll be 4 nights at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
So it'll and maybe who's to say if it's in the summer or if it's in the winter? I don't know. I mean, I always say Eddie Bruce is good Bruce, and I'm not gonna. I'm not going to sit there and go, wait, why isn't he playing, my favorite song or whatever? But, I'm not going to, at this point, I'd be happy to see him out on tour. I'd be happy to see, I saw my first live show since the pandemic on Saturday. I saw Jason Isbell, and it was such a relief sort of to see, to feel live music again. And I'm sure I'll feel that way when I sit down to see Bruce. I'll be happy to see Bruce, and I'll be happy to see the band, and whatever they want to do is good with me. So
I'll put you on the spot. And it's okay if you don't have an answer, but why do you feel there is a cross section of Jason Isbell and Springsteen fans? Because I did not get to see Jason when he was here in Dallas, and I was very upset. I was sad. Why do you think there is that cross section of combination?
Well, I mean, if you had to say, well, sort of who's a young Bruce Springsteen? Well, I guess it's kind of Jason Isbell, because he's first and foremost, he's a songwriter. He's a guy with meaningful lyrics. He's a guy who obviously puts a lot of thought into what he's doing. He doesn't record a song if it's 75% good. He waits till it's 100% good.
Yeah.
And that's you get that same impression with Bruce, that Bruce doesn't casually put any song on a record. He sweats the details of every song. And I get that impression with Jason. And Jason's a guy who's been through hard times, and
yes, he has.
Bruce has been through some hard times, before he became, Bruce Springsteen. And it's funny because Jason's a huge baseball fan, and I met him at Fenway Park a few years ago. He was in town to do before he kind of popped.
Yeah.
And I spent a little time talking to him about baseball, and we're certainly not friendly, but we've corresponded on Twitter a little bit and everything. And I think he's I'm trying to think of the way to put it, but I think he kind of understands that there's a sort of a void for a rock and roll band that people are waiting to see, that are good live and have meaningful songs. And I'm not saying he's trying to fill it, but I think he understands there's a space here that he can really occupy. And I saw he made a big display about he wants people to be vaccinated to come to his show.
Yes.
And I think I don't remember where it was, but there was a facility that canceled his show because they felt like they
right.
And when Fox News reported about it, they called him a country act, and I thought that was kind of funny because he's certainly not a country act. I mean,
exactly.
So I think I don't know. I feel I'm not saying anybody. There's nobody who's the heir to Bruce Springsteen. That's impossible.
Right.
But watching Jason Isbell and what his band is really tight, and they're guitar driven, and he really, you can tell he enjoys playing live. He's not doing it as a chore, and I'd be real comfortable. Sort of if Bruce winds it down or whatever he might do, I think going to see Jason would fill that part of what I want to see.
It at least scratch part of that itch. I know that Jason was on the Brian Koppelman podcast, and he talked about during the height of the pandemic, saying that how much he was okay financially, but he was just missing playing live. I mean, he
Yeah.
needed that crowd.
Yeah.
And I know also, I I would love to talk to him sometime on the podcast. He's one of my, you have those list of, the fantasy, you get a magic, a golden ticket, like, okay, you can now have someone you want. But I know that he tweeted sometime where someone had said, who's someone that who really helped you out beginning, or someone who helped you solid? And Jason said Bruce Springsteen. And everyone's like, well, what's the rest of the story? And he's like, it's not a story I want to share right now. And it's like,
Yeah.
he seems to be a really good guy. And um I I have not struggled with it. I have struggled with my weight my whole life, Pete. I have family and friends that are in recovery, uh, but his song, "It Gets Easier," but it's never
Yeah.
easy, really spoke to me, because not just about addiction, but about anything you're struggling with and working.
Sure.
Yeah, I've loved this latest album. Really good
Yeah.
stuff.
No, it's terrific. It really is. And
Yeah,
the fact that he's a baseball guy, he really, he's a committed Atlanta Braves fan. He loves the Braves.
yeah.
And I have a buddy who covers the Braves, and he's become friendly with Jason. And
Oh, how
he
fun.
said he wants to talk to Jason about music, and Jason wants to talk to him about baseball. And
Yeah.
so that kind of it makes it easy for me to enjoy watching him.
Oh, yeah. That would be Norm Hitzges, here in Dallas, a long time, sports talk show
Yeah.
host.
Sure.
I always think of him when I'm doing an interview, because he said that if you ask Nolan Ryan about his no hitters, you will get a pretty boring, less energetic interview. But if you ask him about the home runs he hit,
Oh yeah.
Ryan will break. And so I always think about that. I was lucky enough to have Vinny Lopez on the show once, and I said, what are the questions he doesn't get asked, right? So because of that reason, I'm sure you think about that sometimes when you're interviewing players, right? Like, okay,
Oh yeah.
what is this question they get asked all the time? What's a different topic I can cover?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all the time. And if you're doing the job right, you're not asking the same question everybody else asks. You're coming up with something else. And
Yeah,
I try to do a lot of research on somebody I'm going to talk to, and figure out, hey, why did you go to this particular college, or what did this
yeah,
particular summer do for you, or you had a crappy year in Double A. How did you get out of that?
yeah,
And that's a lot better than hey, talk about your home run.
yeah.
You try to come up with things, and that's a good way to do it.
When did you know you wanted to start writing? I'm going to changing subject. When did you know you wanted to start covering sports?
It was sort of an accident.
Okay.
It was completely an accident. My dad was a high school guidance counselor, and he didn't work at my high school, thank God. He worked at another high school, and he was very determined that I was going to make something of myself. And so he made me join the Junior Achievement Club at our high school, which I did not want to join, but he made me join
Okay.
because he thought somehow this will lead me to, I don't know what he thought I was going to become or something.
Right.
So grudgingly, I agreed to do this. And the second week I was in, they took us on a tour of our local newspaper in our town. And I thought it was boring. Here's the press, and here's this, and here's that. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And there's the sports editor sitting at his desk, who I knew who that was because his picture was in the paper all the time. And I was a high school sophomore, and I said, hey, you're the sports editor, right? And he goes, yeah. Like, the swim team at the high school is undefeated. You guys never write anything about it. And he says, well, the coach never calls in the scores. If he calls in the scores, we'll run something. So I went to the coach and I said, hey, what's going on? He goes, oh yeah, we called in the score, but they never run them. And I said, well, can I do it? Is it okay if I do it? Yeah, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. So I called in the score, and next day it's in the paper. New Bedford High wins, right? So I called in a couple of more scores, and then I said to him, I said, hey, the sectional championship meet is coming up on Saturday. We got a chance to win. And the guy said, well, why don't you call in the results and get a quote from the coach? I said, well, how do you do that? And he said, well, just ask him about what happened and you write it down. And call us and tell us what he said. Okay. So I do that. And then there's like this thing in the paper, and the
Yeah.
quote from the coach and no byline or anything, but it's a story. And so somebody calls me and they say, hey, we need your address. And I said, well, what is this about? They said, well, yeah, you worked as a correspondent for us. You get paid $10 for doing that. I said, $10. I said, wow. And so that led to getting a job answering phones. And after I did that for about a year, they said, hey, you want to try to cover a high school football game? And I said, sure. And they taught me how to do that. And yada, 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 here I am. But it was completely, I had no intentions of becoming a writer. It just, I thought it was good to get $10 to go to a swim meet. That seemed like a pretty good deal. So that's how it all happened.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
so did you decide to go to college and study journalism? After you got
point,
this taste?
Yeah, I was a pretty bad student, not a bad student, but I wasn't like an honors student in high school or anything.
Yeah.
So I went to UMass and I worked for the school paper. I became a stringer for Associated Press. I covered all of our games and everything. And when I got out of school, I sent resumes all around the Northeast trying to find a paper that would hire me. And I finally found one in upstate New York and, drove up there and, started my career. So it was a series of fortunate events along the way. And I've been super lucky. I've got to see a lot of cool things.
Yeah. So you've been able to cover a World Series because, Boston has done fairly decent, right?
Yeah, I've covered the World Series every year since I don't know, about 2008 maybe.
Okay.
And the All-Star game, I've covered a Super Bowl. I've been to the Olympics once. I've done the NCAA. I covered college basketball for a while. I did the Final Four 5 times. I've been pretty fortunate. I've got to do a lot of different things, and it's been really fun. There's been a few interesting moments along the way, but I've been really lucky to get to do what I do.
Is there something you haven't gotten to cover that you want to that's on your wish list?
No, not really. I think I've done.
That's nice.
All the I think it would be cool to see the Masters, but I know I couldn't write intelligently about golf, so I don't know if I'd want to do that. But yeah, the Super Bowl was good. The Olympics I'm glad I did one Olympics. I wouldn't want to do another one. It was insanely busy. But yeah, now I've been a baseball writer for about 20 years, so I think that's where I'm going to stay. And I've gotten to know a lot of that's where I'm comfortable. And the Boston Globe is always going to care about the Boston Red Sox. So
yeah.
In the media business, that's what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to cover something people care about. So.
Yeah, exactly. Did you grow up a fan of the local New England teams,
I did.
Do you still have that part of you as a fan? And I realize you're a professional, but
more the Patriots than anything else. We had Patriots season tickets when I was a kid. Okay. And I really grew up loving the Patriots, and I haven't covered the Patriots, which is good because I'd be terrible at it. Yeah. And I was a fan of the Red Sox, but when you start covering the sport, you kind of you see what's under the hood. Yeah. And what's under the hood is not always all that pleasant. So people ask me all the time, are you a Red Sox fan? I said I'm a fan of not having any rain delays and the game getting over quickly and having something to write about. And yes, if that's a win, that's fine. If that's a loss, that's fine too. I get paid. I get paid the same way every time. So now there was one good time that Springsteen and sports writing intersected.
Okay, tell me, please.
So I when I was working in Westchester, they sent me to cover an LPGA event in New Rochelle, New York. And I was like, really? I got to go cover an LPGA? And they said, oh, yeah, we need somebody to go. We're sending 4 or 5 people. Yeah. And one of the things you need to cover is the Pro-Am, which they have on Tuesday, where the players play with like quasi-celebrities from the area. And so I show up to cover this thing thinking, boy, this is going to be just the most dreadful experience. And the Pro-Am is Nancy Lopez, the famous women's golfer. And she's playing with Rush Limbaugh and, believe it or not, Steve Van Zandt.
Oh, how fun!
Who at the time lived in Westchester and is a pretty good golfer. Now I can't think of 2 people of disparate perspectives than Steve Van Zandt and Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, exactly.
here they are with Nancy Lopez and like the president of the local bank. So all of the media watches the first hole and then they leave because they're going to play 17 more. Well, I'm like, hey, this is my chance to talk to Steve Van Zandt. I'm going to follow
Yeah,
them
exactly.
the whole time. So a few people follow him for the second hole, a few people follow him for the third hole, but by the fourth hole, it's only me.
Yeah.
It's me and the four of them playing golf in their caddies. So around the eighth hole, Steve kind of comes over and he goes, hey, what's going on? I said, well, I'm a sports writer for the local paper. And I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of, the East Street Band. And he goes, hey, nice to meet you. And, blah, blah, blah. And, we have a little conversation. And then he comes back, a couple holes later and he goes, I can't believe I'm playing golf with this blankety blank guy.
Yeah,
we got
exactly.
we got nothing in common, but I'm trying to not say anything. And Steve's wearing a bandana under a golf hat. It's the greatest thing.
Yeah.
And so one of the cardinal rules of sports writing is, you can't ask for autographs. There's no asking for autographs.
Exactly.
You can't ask for autographs. So they finish up their round, and I get a couple comments from Steve, and I get a couple comments from Nancy Lopez and Rush Limbaugh. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I really want to ask Steve for an autograph, but I can't ask Steve for an autograph, And so I kind of resigned myself to that fact. And as I'm kind of walking away, Steve says, hey, and he flips me a golf ball that he signed.
Oh, nice.
So I took that. I wasn't going to give that back. So I have, I don't know how many autographed Steve Van Zandt golf balls there are in the world. There can't be too many of them, but I have a Steve Van Zandt autograph. And then later that summer, they played the at Madison Square Garden. It was, I want to say it wasn't 99. It was that early in the 2000s when they had that 10 show run in Madison Square Garden. And one night I was pretty close to the stage, kind of right in front of Steve. And at one point I was like, Steve, I'm the guy from the golf course. and he kind of looked at me and he went, hey, I don't know if he actually remembered me.
Yeah.
I don't think he did. But I remember they played Lost in the Flood that night. It was the first time they had done that in a long time. And so between waving at Steve and hearing Lost in the Flood, that was a good night.
Any chance did you fly down to Jerry World when the NCAA tournament was there in Dallas and Bruce did the free show?
No, I was
okay.
Doing baseball at that point. Yeah, I didn't see that. So
yeah.
Yeah, I know that was a big thing. No, I couldn't do that one.
Yeah, that's fun. That's great. So you mentioned Lost in the Flood. Are there other songs that you're still chasing? And obviously none of us have heard anything from Western Stars, A Letter to You, but are there songs that if we get a tour, next year that is on your little wish list?
There really isn't, because these last few tours where he's done the entire album, we've heard everything on The River. We've heard everything on Born in the USA. We've heard everything on different records. So there's I don't know how much there's left out there that you can say it's never been played live or whatever.
Right.
When I heard Price You Pay at the Spectrum, which I talked about before, that was one I really wanted to hear. I love that song. I love what side 4 of The River, which nobody understands sides anymore. But yeah, and when I heard that, that was, for me, that was like, okay, I've checked off what I always wanted to hear. So that was that was it. So,
are there what? And I don't ask favorite songs or albums, but are there songs or albums that mean a special amount to you, that have a special meaning to you and if so, tell me why?
Yeah, well, The River for sure, because it was the first time I really embraced a blues record. I was old enough to really love The River. And beyond that, like, Tunnel of Love is a record that I listen to all the time. If I'm driving somewhere for a long time, I'll always put on Tunnel of Love. And there's different songs that make me think about different people or different experiences and stuff like that. But there's no one, like The River is the record I listen to the most. And seeing the River tour was so great, and then hearing all of those songs, in order and live, and that was just terrific. But yeah, there's not, some days it's Devils and Dust for a while. Like it just depends on my mood, and I do a lot of driving for work, so I've had my share of 12-hour rides where I've listened to everything there is to listen to. And I think I have, I don't know how many, 2,500 Bruce songs on my iPhone,
Sure.
between all the shows and everything else. And, and it's it's funny now, like how, you can buy shows for $10,
Yeah.
they download right on your computer. I can remember going to record stores, and it was almost like you were buying drugs. You would walk in and say like, "Oh, yeah, any new Springsteen in?" And the guy would look around and go, "Oh, we have this." And,
Yeah.
these like those CDs from Italy or wherever. And, those were like $50. And, the guy made you put it in a bag like you were buying drugs or something. It was funny. And now it's like, yeah, you get whatever you want anytime you want.
Well, I kind of got into a little bit of a Twitter back and forth with someone who he is just obsessed with tracks too, and he was going on and on about how Bruce had promised something special this year and he's let us down. And I was like, okay, he's done a podcast with the former president, they're making a book about it, he's returned to Broadway. We got Letter to You at the end of last year. He sang at the inaugural. He sang at the 9/11. He sang in the tribute to all the people that died at COVID on national TV. And we're getting every month they give us an official release,
right?
Bootleg. What the F do you want the guy to give you?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, I look at it like, back in the day, right? We would wait years for anything.
Yes.
Anything. Right? There was,
right.
You'd go 18 months at a time without hearing a single thing from Bruce, right? And there'd be speculation. Well, they might be in the studio, and we heard they might have done this, and then they would put out a record, and you would hear the band say, "Oh, well, we recorded 20 songs, and here are the 8 of them that made the record," or whatever, And nobody, that was it, right? You were happy to get what you got, and so I look at it like, geez, this is like the most productive I've ever seen him, right? You get stuff all the time. Like there's no lack of, you used to go, years at a time without ever hearing a peep from the guy.
Yeah.
And I respect the idea that he doesn't want to put things out unless he feels they're perfect. And for a long time, right, he didn't want to put anything out until it was, dead letter A+. He wasn't, going to, compromise his standards. Well, what he's doing now is completely different from that, right? He's putting out, live stuff that they dig up, and they clean it up a little bit, and off it goes. So, yeah, I think if you're expecting him to give you anything else, you're being unrealistic, because I think he's given you, if you're somebody who's followed his career for a long time, this is, a flow of Bruce compared to what it used to be. It's a raging river compared to what it used to be, because there was a time it was drip, drip, drip for a long time. So.
Absolutely. What I always like to preface, what haven't I asked you that I should have, Pete?
Boy, I don't know. You asked me a lot. There's not really like a question, I guess, but this is I guess the one thing that I think for me is Bruce. There's 2 things I do in my life that I don't think about anything else except what I'm doing at the time. And that's playing blackjack and going to see Springsteen. Okay. And those are the only 2 things I can do when I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about where I got to be, or I'm not thinking about a story I could have done better, or what am I going to do the next one, my family or anything. And when I walk in to see Bruce until I walk out, I have no other thoughts about other than what I'm watching.
Okay.
And there's nothing else, and my job can be fairly stressful at times. And that's one thing I can do that, just everything else kind of gets pushed to the side. And I really value that. And every time I see Bruce, I think, I hope this isn't the last time I see him, because, I don't know where I can find this anywhere else. Now, I do find it playing $5 blackjack, but that can be expensive after a while. So I don't.
Absolutely, yes.
I don't want to get my therapy while I'm losing money.
Yes.
But it's I don't know. There's something about seeing him in person that, everything gets vanishes, and I'm able to just enjoy what I'm seeing. And I went to go see a Seeger session show in Madison Square Garden,
Okay.
And that was the only time I was like, I'm kind of thinking about other stuff because I'm not crazy about this music. But other than that, I've always thought, that was the only time I wasn't enthralled by a blues show.
I got someone on Facebook after Letter to You came out said, I wish he would stop putting out new material. He's tarnishing his legacy. And
Oh,
I
that's right.
and I said, you don't like the album, fine, that's your choice, but I don't think there's much this man can do to tarnish his legacy. And I did not even go to the Seeker sessions because I was not. I mean, it was
Yeah,
okay, but I was like, it's not something I enjoyed. But a buddy of mine went and said it was as close to a religious experience he's ever had.
yeah. Well, yeah. To each
And
his own, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, right. And so I think that's exactly the way it. It all depends on where it is. Um, I'm the same way. I'm happy with whatever he chooses to give us, whatever he chooses to play. I've only seen him 16 times. So I do have a list of songs that I would love to
sure.
see and chase. But it it the first 7 times I saw him, he did not do Thunder Road.
Wow.
Just luck of the draw. My first show was 2002 at the Rising. I went all the way. He had not done Thunder Road, and then he was alternating between doing Dream Baby Dream or Thunder Road, ending the show. And every show I saw him, he did Thunder Road. He never did Dream Baby Dream, which would
Yeah.
be like, I would have liked to see that for a change of pace. So, but I'm not going to complain about doing that. This has been great. I just love this, Pete. I could talk to you all night, and we didn't even get into how bad the Rangers are, and are they ever going to get good again? It just feels like it broke my heart that they traded Gallo. I know they needed to, and I hope Joey does well for the Yankees. But it's boy, a lot of bad baseball in Arlington. A lot of
Oh
bad
yeah.
baseball.
Well, at least you got Garcia, so that's he's somebody you can build around maybe. And
Yeah,
I
maybe
think
so.
I think they have a plan, and they haven't had a plan for a while.
Yes, I agree.
And Chris Young, I think, knows what he's doing. So I think they at least, it's going
Yeah.
to take them a little while, but I think they're pointing in the right direction now.
Yeah. We talked about, my son and I, that when Walsh was leading them and they went and played, San Francisco, we felt like, American League champions. And then the next year when we lost the Cardinals, we felt like World Series losers.
Yeah, right.
It was
right,
that,
right.
And we still joke about, if we see someone in a St. Louis jersey, we're like, too soon, too soon, too soon.
Well, I can tell you, maybe this will
Yeah,
make you happy as a Rangers fan. One of
yeah,
my favorite guys that I've covered
yeah,
over my time is Mitch Moreland when he was with the Red Sox. And
yes,
Mitch could not be a nicer guy. He's as good a guy as you would want him to be.
yeah,
And one of my favorite guys to cover. And when the Red Sox traded him, I was really bummed. I was like, oh man, like my boy Mitch,
yeah,
he's just a really good dude. So he always talks with he's always bummed about what happened because they were so close. They were a pitch away from winning. And,
yeah,
a couple times they were a pitch away. And
exactly.
so
Yeah.
so
And what
it's too
was
bad.
funny, I always loved, I'm a big, I listen to the Ticket here in Dallas, right? The big sports station here. And one of the morning guys was distant cousin to Mitch Moreland. I mean, they
Okay.
both were from the really small town of Mississippi, and Gordon talked to his mom and said that through, fourth, sixth cousins, I mean, it was not close at all, but he kind of adopted him because he's like, oh, he's family. And I
Yeah.
just always loved Mitch Moreland. I just think, yeah, I was
Yeah.
glad to see success when he moved on to someone else. But yes,
Yeah.
that is a good story, and I appreciate you hearing that.
Yeah. He's a good guy. Yeah. So you can live comfortably knowing Mitch Moreland was a good guy.
Yeah. The other thing, and then I'm going to get to the Mary question. My best one of my best friends is a Red Sox fan. And so before the pandemic, he and I would always go to a Red Sox Rangers game and enjoy that together. And we had just got Adrian Beltre,
Sure,
and
yeah.
he was telling everyone around that he said, you guys are going to love this guy. He said, I
Oh,
was
yeah.
so sorry the Red Sox did not keep him. You are going to love this guy. And then he ended up having this really nice career with the Rangers. So
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes that Theo Epstein made with the Red Sox was trading for Adrian Gonzalez and then letting Adrian Beltre go.
yeah,
If they had done the reverse,
yeah,
the Red Sox might have won the series a couple more times because Adrian was on the verge of really putting it together. So
yeah. And just he seems to be like a really good guy, not only a great player, but a good guy.
he's I only covered him that 1 year he was in Boston, but I can honestly say every player over 162, you see him at some point where they don't play hard. You know, like
Yeah,
it's just not their day. That guy, he ran his ass off to first base every time. He played hard as he could on the field. He played every game like it was his last game, and I there were times I was like, man, I can't believe he's still got this energy. And
yeah,
the manager would come to him and say, hey, we want to give you a day off. No day off. I'm playing tomorrow. You know, and
yeah,
I really admired him, and he was a good guy too. He was it took him a while to warm up to you, but once he warmed up to you, he was very friendly, and we were all kind of bummed to see him go. And then when he became so great, we were like, man, boy, the Red Sox really messed this
yeah,
up because
yeah,
you know
exactly.
he became this tremendous player. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right. If you are a Pete Abram fan and you're listening to this, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I end every episode with the Mary question. And what that is Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher, just recently retired from the Philadelphia area, would, in his honors English class every year, would have his seniors break down Thunder Road as a poem, look at the lyrics, talk about the imagery that Bruce uses, compare it to other poems like Robert Frost. And then at the end of the 2 days, he asks the question to his class, does Mary get in the car? Pete, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Oh yeah, of course, because tramps like us, you know. So yeah, I think that's the whole, you know, in that genre, he's talking about going somewhere with a girl in most of his songs.
Right.
So yeah, I think she definitely gets in the car. Yeah.
All right. Very nice.
Well, do you know about the whole Maggie Haberman? Is it waves or sways?
Yeah. So I actually sell a T-shirt on my website that says the question isn't whether it sways or waves, it's does she get in the car?
Yeah.
I do find it interesting, Pete, and I think this is I someone, and I can't remember who, said that the reaction to Bruce Springsteen's Super Bowl commercial, the diversity of the people on the extreme right and the extreme left being critical of him, tells you how far away from the middle we are as a country. I don't
Oh
remember
yeah.
who said that, but I thought it was great. But I find it a little sad that there are fans that say it will be sways till, or like, till you take it from my cold dead body. I can understand having an opinion, but I also think, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, well, supposedly, right, it came out that the original lyric was indeed sways.
Right.
That somebody said they saw that.
Right.
But then when you listen to it, it certainly sounds like waves. So
Right.
it's sort of, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's anything worth, losing your mind over. But I mean, it's, I don't know. Yeah, to me, she definitely gets in the car. She's on the porch, she's in the house. And, they're talking about the future. I mean, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, she didn't just let him drive off. So.
And someone else brought up the fact that I'm racing in the street. She talks about she's on her daddy's porch, and they said that's probably the same porch that she was on in Thunder Road, which I thought was a great line. So that's good.
I mean, every other song is about a girl in a car going somewhere. So
there you go.
They must have gone somewhere, I would imagine, right? So,
there we go. And then one of my other guests said that Moonlight Motel is the sequel, that they got in the car, they drove all the way to California, and then he's mourning Mary's passing. And so,
that maybe, yeah, maybe, I guess that could be it. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Uh,
neat.
I wonder
Pete,
how much Bruce sees all of these people trying to interpret, what he's saying and goes, man, I was just writing a song, he must find some of this amusing. He has to.
so I remember when Carter was president, and on Doonesbury, the character Jimmy Thudpicker, I think
Yeah, sure.
was talking to Bob Dylan, and on Doonesbury, and this was Carter was talking about Dylan being the voice of a generation and all this other stuff, and the offline, off camera, there's Jimmy, and Bob says something like, I was just trying to make it rhyme.
Yeah.
And Thudpicker looks at it like, now he tells us this. So right, that's Bruce. Like, I just was trying to make it rhyme,
Yeah, I somehow don't see him sitting at his home, all of these years later going, all right, this is going to be where we, we're going to the Moonlight Motel. Like, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, very nice. All right. If someone wants to reach you, where are you on social media?
As a requisite of my job, I am everywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'm at Pete Abe on Twitter. I'm at peterabraham.globe on Facebook. I'm at Pete Abe on Pete Abe Globe on Instagram.
Okay.
And bostonglobe.com for all my stories. So there's, if you want to yell at me about my horrible baseball opinions, there's plenty of places where you can do that. There's no shortage of places to do that. So,
are you working on anything now, or just covering the team?
Well, yeah. In fact, we had a meeting today to discuss what we're going to do about the playoffs, which it looks like they're going to get the wild card. So, I'm probably working on a story about Kyle Schwarber, who has been the unexpected savior of the Red Sox these last few weeks, and he's kind of put the team on his back offensively for a while now. So I got to start doing some research into Kyle Schwarber and figure out something good to ask him. So
I do love your cover photo on Twitter of, it looks like Bruce is in the Red Sox.
Yes, and one of the Red Sox photographers took that.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to send me a copy of that. Yeah, it's Bruce sitting in the home dugout next to the bullpen phone.
Yeah.
And he picked it up and pretended he was the manager of the team or whatever it was. And when I covered the Mets, Bruce played at Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
And Backstreets was doing a series of stories about all of the different people who came on stage with Bruce during that tour.
Yeah.
And one of them was Al Leiter, the Mets pitcher.
Yeah.
And then whose son, Jack Leiter, just signed with
I was
Rangers.
just going to say, we are hoping good things for him.
Yeah. And so they reached out to me. Backstreets reached out to me and said, hey, would you be willing to write something about Al Leiter, appearing with Bruce? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I tracked down Al Leiter, who is kind of like a phony Springsteen fan. He didn't know the lyrics to Rosalita. Yeah. He was kind of, and I was like, so you get to go on stage. You don't even know the damn lyrics to Rosalita. Yeah. And I'm watching from the crowd, like, that's not fair at all. And to this day, it's the only freelance piece I've ever done that I didn't get a dime for. And I'm very happy to never have gotten a dime for it. And I keep it in my knapsack. I have it in a plastic sleeve in my scorebook that I've always kept with me, because I believe that someday I'm going to run across Bruce and I can have him sign it. And I'm going to have Al Leiter sign it. And my joke with Al Leiter is, I'm not letting you sign it until I get Springsteen to sign it first, because I don't want you taking up too much space for Springsteen. And so I'm sure I'm never going to see Springsteen to have him sign it. That's never going to happen. But if I happen to be walking through the Newark Airport one day and there he is, I'll have him sign it. So, but that's like the happiest thing I've ever written, was I got to write a little story for Backstreets. I was more happy about that than writing about the World Series.
I can imagine. I was thrilled when Ken Rosen reached out to me last year and says, hey, you're coming up on your 5th anniversary. Would you mind if Backstreet says it's okay if I wrote an article about your podcast? Am I
Yeah.
okay? Hell
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, safe travels,
Thanks.
and good luck. I appreciate all your time, and hopefully we will get to see each other either when you're down, if you're next season when you're down in Texas, reach out to me. Maybe we can, I know you're always busy, but maybe we can meet a time for a drink
That'd be
or a
great.
meal or something. That'd be good. And please, take care of yourselves. Listeners, you go get vaccinated, go wear your mask. Let's
Oh
all be
yeah.
good to each other, because that's the only way we're gonna get through this. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
All
Goodbye.
right.
Set Listing Bruce has a Patreon page where you can offer to donate anything from $1 a month up to whatever amount you want. Thanks to the wonderful people who support the podcast through Patreon, I'm able to cover the cost of the Zoom recordings and the hosting of the podcast, putting it out, things like that. So thank you to Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosek, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Mary Thomas, Alex Samolta, Andrew Goddard, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio. Each of you are my Springsteen siblings. You are my angels, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all your support and love.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.